restaurant declined to say which of the chain's 1,500 locations would see those surcharges. According to their website, the cost of a cooked egg, it starts at $2.99 right now.
The Dow is up 106 points right now. This is CBS News.
Think O'Reilly Auto Parts for all your car care needs. Get the parts and service you need fast from the professional parts people at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Price varies based on product and subscription plan.
Hey guys, let's talk ED because millions of men experience it, but not everyone can access or afford treatments like Viagra. Well, HIMS can help. Through HIMS.com, you can get a full range of treatment options for ED, including daily or as-needed meds through a 100% online process. It all starts with an online intake form. Get started at hims.com/joy, and from there, a medical provider licensed in your state will determine if ED treatment is right for you. If prescribed, your medication is shipped to you for free. Find the ED treatment that fits your needs with options up to 95% less than the brand names. Millions of men experience ED, but HIMS can help. To start your free online visit and save up to 95%, go to hims.com/joy. That's hims.com/joy for your free online visit. HIMS.com/JOY.
Hey neighbor, when you talk, others listen. If it's on Good Neighbor Talk, keep it here. WGNS, AM, FM, online. We're the Good Neighbor Network, FM 101.9 and AM 1450 Murfreesboro, FM 100.5 Smyrna, audio and video streaming at wgnsradio.com. This is the Roundtable. A look at the news, views, politics, and people that are shaping Rutherford County.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to your Tuesday morning edition of the Roundtable Show with Rick and Wayne. Good morning, Wayne. How are you, buddy?
Good morning, Rick. I'm looking out the window and seeing the sunshine, and I didn't wear a jacket in, so I'm feeling pretty good right now.
I busted out the Speedo and got the suntan lotion ready, man. I'm ready. I'm over this weather, dude.
I'm not quite that far.
We had snow a week ago today.
I know. I'm hopeful that was number 2 and we're done, but I know that many of our
14 false winters in spring, do we not?
I think many of our educators and students probably would like another one, but I'm hopeful that we're 2 and done, and we can start thinking about being on the lake here in just a few weeks.
Months.
So, but I'm hopeful. So, what are we going to do without football for a while?
I'm on basketball right now, man. Yeah. Tennessee's back up to 4, so I don't know what this is going to do on the seat.
Yeah. The Blue Raiders, men and women, they swept
they did.
Western, so that's always
we're wearing our both of us. We're like twinning today, man.
Yeah, we're twinning, I guess. But I can. Coach McDivitt, of course, was at Rotary with us a couple of weeks ago, and I guess it was, of course, it's Thursday, and they were playing Western Saturday, and I said, Coach, back in my day, the fraternities used to carry a coffin on the floor, and it had a sign, "Better dead than red." So he just chuckled. He thought that was the coolest. So congratulations to the Blue Raiders.
Exactly.
So,
how many passenger bus did y'all ride back then? I'm picturing in the 70s like that, but why it comes up, the school board right now is in this big contract, and it's lucky we got somebody here with schools today. But there's 78, 84, 90.
Yeah,
23.
I suspect we were probably 74 back in the day.
Really, they were that big.
I mean, I know it's 90 now, but I was a snot nose, so I don't know that I really cared as long as I
just got there.
Got to where I wanted to be. So, but different time.
Well, with insurance, I'm really learning a lot about buses. I didn't think I'd ever want to know that, but I'm knowing it now.
Well, I've had a little experience with it over the time. So, Rick, this morning, what a great friend and long time education professional. before the show, we were talking out in the, I think we refer to it as the green room, but I call it the blue room. But met Dr. Mark Gullion back in 2005, 2006, prior to running for the school board, and just and don't see you all the time, but seen you quite a bit over the years, and have always thought of you not only as an education professional, but a great friend. But this morning, Rick, Dr. Mark Gullion, Director of Special Population and Federal Programs. So, Dr. Gullion, welcome, and
yes,
thank
sir.
you for being with Rick and I this morning.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you being here. You guys talking about the Blue Raiders this morning made me think about, we probably have a heck of a team at the central office. We've got several 1,000-point scorers, at MTSU with Coach Harris and Dr. Martin, Dr. Chastain.
Yeah.
I might be able to just give them a few passes, here and there. But, yeah, we've got some.
Sounds like we got an alumni game we can get going, right?
That's pretty cool. So, yeah. So, we always try to get our guests to talk a little bit about their the background, where you grew up, family, siblings, especially with you being an education professional, did you have parents that were in education prior,
Yes,
all
sir.
of that stuff?
Yes, sir. So I guess to start off, my grandfather was stationed at Seward Air Force Base in Smyrna.
How cool.
In the mid-'50s. And so that's kind of how my family came to be there in Smyrna, although my father and his side of the family were from North Alabama. My mother and her family were from the Donaldson Hermitage area.
Okay.
But that's how we came to be known there in Smyrna. And so, my father was a longtime teacher, just retired about 4 or 5 years ago.
Wow.
He finished his career in Alabama.
Okay.
But taught at several of the Smyrna and Laverne schools. So he taught PE mostly at Laverne Primary. He taught at Thurman Francis. He taught at Smyrna Primary as well. And then myself, growing up in Smyrna, Smyrna is very near and dear to my heart. Surprisingly, and especially this is, I think, important for our parents out there that are going through those rezoning talks as a district as we are right now. We never really moved as a family. I lived in Smyrna pretty much my whole life, but yet I went to Smyrna Elementary in kindergarten, John Coleman in first grade, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th at Smyrna Primary, 5th and 6th at Thurman Francis, 7th and 8th at Stewartsboro, and then I graduated from Smyrna High. So even though we never moved.
What year?
From Smyrna High? 1998.
Okay.
98, yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes,
Rick and I have an ongoing battle between his graduation
It's
class.
not a battle, man. I win every time.
Well, that's we may actually have to get a radio poll. So.
Yes.
So, was your mom a Donaldson Don or a Two Rivers?
Both. Yeah, she went to Two Rivers Middle. And then,
Okay.
and then a Donaldson Don.
I forget
sir.
what Two Rivers, what their mascot was.
I forget
Maybe
too.
a
And
pirate,
my wife
but-
actually went to middle school there at Two Rivers.
Okay.
But I'll have to ask her about that.
When I played at middle, we had some guys. Well, Kenny Nolan and I believe Tom Nolan that were principals at Siegel and Riverdale. I think they were both Donaldson Dons.
Okay.
So and then Larry Coffey, who I played with at middle my freshman and sophomore year, he played at Riverdale. I mean at Two Rivers. So
Okay.
So we've got connections. The old NIL Nashville Interscholastic League.
Yes.
So that's pretty cool
yes,
too.
yes.
So I'm sorry I interrupted.
No, you're good.
Talking about your background.
Yeah, and so a lot of the hard work that I think was instilled in me came from, my grandparents and then down to my parents. Grandfather, as I mentioned, 4 years in the Navy, 27 years in the Air Force, spent most of his time in Smyrna at Seward before relocating, years later. My dad stayed around. He actually went into the Air Force. My brother's been in the Air Force, so I'm kind of the black sheep a little bit in that I went into education. But, talking about basketball earlier, that gave me an opportunity when I was in Smyrna to work camps and, work with younger children at that time. And I think that kind of instilled a love in me and, teaching them the fundamentals of basketball, soccer, baseball, and then transferring that over into education. So Actually went off to college, graduated from Auburn, got an opportunity to play soccer at a community college for 2 years and then transferred to Auburn. But always knew that I wanted to come back, wanted to raise a family here in Rutherford County just because of my experiences here, and wanted to give back to, the schools that really fostered that in me. So started teaching first grade at Smyrna Elementary for 4 years. And then was able to go back to MTSU and get a couple of graduate degrees, but then get into the administration route. So was able to be an assistant principal at Smyrna Elementary and Smyrna Primary for 3 years, do a short stint as an interim principal at Laverne Primary, and then became principal in 2009 at Cedar Grove Elementary.
What about siblings? Any siblings in education?
I do, and she fought it for a long time, but I have an older sister, and so proud of her. She's been kind of living the military life herself for the last 20 years, but just recently, this past summer, moved back to Rutherford County, and so she's a 5th grade teacher at John Coleman for the first year this year.
Wow.
So excited for her, and she's just a fantastic teacher and just inspires students. So just proud of her and what she's doing.
Well, I think John Coleman probably one of our proudest accomplishment, because the old building was in such disrepair, and of course such a high free and reduced and English as a second language ESL population there, and they were just so grateful for that new facility.
Yes.
And I tell the story that during the construction of the new structure, there was hardly any way to get in and out of that place. It was very difficult. But I was chairman of the school board at that time, and you get so many phone calls, but I never received a complaint by a faculty member, administrative, parent. They were just so grateful to have that facility being constructed.
Absolutely, and it's so interesting, as we've grown as a district, just in my time, as an educator, and the amount of buildings that we've been able to fund and create, it really instills that sense of pride in that community. And they've done a great job, not just at John Coleman, but all of our new schools of, taking care of them and making them feel new years down the line.
Phil, Rick's pretty proud of his tenure as commissioner. Remind Dr. Gillian how many buildings and additions during your time?
14 in 4 years,
Yeah.
which was part of that was John Coleman, because that was my district, and that was one of the first things I went and wanted to tour all the schools, which was Smyrna Elementary, John Coleman's, Smyrna Primary was just out of my district, but we started hitting all the schools, and which you went to John Coleman, the floor was spongy, and they had, the lines were running down the hallways at the top of the ceiling because of the way they were, just no way to put technology into that building the way it was. The cafeteria.
Environments.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, there was always that, lore that there was a bomb shelter under that building, but we never could find that. And I figured one day we might get rid of that building and we'll find it then. But
they just had so many portables, and whenever they had a good shower, children waded through several inches of water just to get into the bricks and mortar.
Wow.
And it was I'm grateful to Rick as a commissioner, and grateful to the school board taking that at the bottom of the list and moving it to the top priority. And I was pleased to, like Rick, to have had a part in that.
Sure, absolutely. And it's important as we continue to grow to not forget those schools that that are getting older now, and continuing to renovate, not only build new, but also renovate those schools that are in need as well.
Well, maintenance and construction certainly is not cheap.
It's not. And, you can't give enough kudos to Mr. Lee and his team, and, what they've been able to do, and forward thinking, with maintaining the buildings that we have. We continue to grow 51 schools currently, and we'll be opening up number 52, Poplar Hill Elementary, here in just a few short months.
So I've always referred to your position as director of Title I. Is Is that incorrect?
No, that's true. So that's one of the areas that we oversee on the federal program side. And I think, I've been at the district office for 8 years and had the opportunity to oversee our special education department, and then had an opportunity to transition with Mr. Spurlock under, federal programs. And so it's kind of, I think, gotten bigger over the years, but we oversee Title I currently, and we were talking about this earlier, but currently we have 12 schools that we serve, 10 on the northern end, and Whitworth Buchanan Middle and Kittrell are the two kind of outliers that we serve. Next year, as we sit today, we're looking at adding 3 additional schools on the northern end.
Wow.
So that'll be Rocky Fork Middle, Rock Springs Middle, and Smyrna High School. And, with these additional federal dollars, it just, adds to the enhancement of those schools. Those are 3 high-performing schools that we currently have. So we're excited to give them these opportunities to enhance really what they're already doing. These dollars are always supplemental, so they're not used to supplant, what our state and local provides for us already. But we're excited about this transition for those schools.
Remind our audience what it takes to be a Title I.
That's really what makes Rutherford County unique. So as far as, the requirement, the federal requirement is that the school have at least 40% of their students eligible for either free or reduced lunch. And so I mentioned we have 51 schools this year. 28 of those schools actually meet that eligibility criteria. But of course, we just receive a finite amount of funding within our school system. So if we were to take that funding and spread it amongst those 28 schools, we really wouldn't make an impact with one. Sure. So currently, and this changes year to year, but currently those 14 schools that will serve next year all sit above 70%.
Free and reduced.
Free and reduced, yes, sir.
Does English as a second language, does that figure into the equation?
Not necessarily with Title I,
okay.
But there is another federal program that is within that realm that's called Title III, and that is specific to your English learners.
I don't know that I was familiar with that.
Yeah, and it's small in comparison as far as the allocations that we receive, but we do receive that for those students as well.
I guess you were a principal there for a while at Smyrna Primary, and you were also a student there. I went there back in the day, let's say. I lived across the street.
Ancient history, I think you could say.
That's pretty much you spent your career as far as teaching and your administrative work and everything else are all in Title I schools.
Absolutely.
So you're really not seen outside of that. And
Correct.
now you're managing over all that.
Correct.
So what your life lessons you've learned through that help you what you're doing today?
It's so interesting, and we have these conversations, especially being an administrator at a Title I school. You have it's natural to have transition of teachers, and some of my teachers may go to a non-Title I school after a year, and they would come back to me and be like, we didn't realize the things that we were missing, by having this additional funding. And so, we have some teachers that spend their whole career there. To me, it was just more meaningful because you're really making an impact for those students. And for some of those students, you have to be daddy and mama for those 7-8 hours that you're with them. Sure. You got to be nurse. You got to be coach. So to me, it was more impactful, and you really can see kind of your life's work when you're working in situations like that.
I listen to quite a bit of talk radio, and so often I'm hearing these talking heads talking about federal funds, and then we're interested in local districts. Remind our audience as to what federal funds come our way, and are there mandates attached to those that maybe are not helpful?
I guess it probably depends on, just answering the second half of that question, who you talk to as far as the mandates.
Sure.
I think that's true in life. Nobody's going to give you any money without having
strings.
Some type of standard or strings attached to it. So, that's really come to be expected in my role. But as far as the area there, we talked a lot about Title I, and most people are familiar with that. They've heard of that. It's more of kind of your largest funding body. There's another federal program or federal grant, Title II, and that is specific to professional learning. So increasing the professional learning, that can be used across the district. small in comparison to Title I, but
Sure.
it's still an allocation that we receive as a district that continues to provide learning for our teachers, our educators, our educational assistants. Title III we talked about, that's specific to our English learners. Another one that you probably have heard of the acronym, and you know how we love acronyms in education, but IDEA.
Right.
And so that's specific to our students with disabilities. And that's actually in two pots. So there's a Part B, which is a pretty hefty allocation, and that's for students ages 3 to 22. And then there's a preschool portion. So they actually receive two allocations there. A couple others that are maybe a little less known, McKinney-Vento is for our homeless and displaced students.
Yeah.
So Title IX, a little more known there. And then the last one that is we're very proud of in Rutherford County, and that's our career and technical education program. And so excited about that and the opportunities that our students have, but that's also a federal grant that Ms. Pilgrim and her team manage.
Right. We've had Jessica Johnson with the
Yes,
Atlas,
yes.
what, 2 or 3 times maybe, Rick? And of course, Rick and I are both with the Smyrna Rotary Club, and the past President's Council has given over the last 3 years, some money. I won't say how much,
Yes.
but just trying to help that program as well.
She's an unbelievable champion for those students, and every time that she's able to receive funding for her program, she's ecstatic, and she's told me about the work that the Rotary's done and so many other entities across Rutherford County that have helped her along the way.
Great. You're listening to Mark Gullion, Dr. Mark Gullion. I don't want to leave doctor out of that. But,
He worked hard
get
for
myself
that.
in trouble. Exactly right. Director of, I guess it would be Title I. Kind of encompasses it all. I didn't write down. You had a pretty long title.
All
there.
those federal programs.
I should
Yeah.
have passed it.
I have to let Wayne do it when he brings you back in. But,
That is okay. It's long.
we're going to take our first break and be right back with you in just a minute.
Chip Walters here with Exit Realty Bob Lamb & Associates. I was named a top 10 agent in the #1 Exit Realty office in America in 2021. The top question I get around town, how's the market? Good question. And the answer's changed a few times this year alone. I'd like to know what you've heard and share some solid data we have. Give me a call and let's have a cup of coffee and take a look at what's happening in your neighborhood. All my contact info is right on my website, choosechip.net. I'm Chip Walters with Exit Realty Bob Lamb & Associates.
Are you tired of feeling like just another number with your insurance provider? At Rayburn Insurance Agency in Smyrna, Agent Rick Hall prides himself on offering personalized service that puts you first. Every client's needs are unique. From personal home and auto coverage to tailored business insurance, Rick Hall's got you covered. Rick Hall at Rayburn Insurance Agency in Smyrna, where you're more than just a policy number. You're a neighbor.
Murfreesboro is conducting a special census, and we need your help. An accurate population count means more shared state revenue for things like road repairs, park improvements, and new sidewalks. Here's Murfreesboro Mayor Shane McFarland.
Another big benefit is the more dollars we receive could also help keep our taxes low. We need everyone to participate, so take part in our 2025 special census.
Count me in.
Okay, count me in.
And count me in too.
Let's make sure every resident counts. Visit murfreesborocensus.com.
For 75 years, Murfreesboro Medical Clinic has been a cornerstone of health and compassion in our community. From our humble beginnings to the advanced, comprehensive care we offer today, our commitment to you has never wavered. With 8 locations across Murfreesboro and Middle Tennessee, and over 100 physicians, we continue to provide the highest standard of care. Then, now, and always, your health is our mission.
This is Good Neighbor Events with Bart Walker. Brought to you by AmeriCare Pest Control and the law offices of John Day.
I've got pests, bees, buzzing rodents running all through my house. Ants chewing wood, and look, there's a mouse. I'm overrun with pests, but you're gonna be sure. safe and secure. It's the last rites for those pests. Call the best of the best to get rid of your pest.
893-7111. AmeriCare Services Incorporated. Call us today. 893-7111.
Let's check those WGNS Good Neighbor events. Not this week, but next week. Monday, March the 3rd, brings the Rutherford County Beekeepers Association meeting to the Lane Agri-Park. It's always on the first Monday evening at 7 o'clock, and the Lane Agri-Park is at 315 John R. Rice Boulevard. There's a free grief support group every Wednesday morning at 10 at the St. Clair Senior Center, and the St. Clair Senior Center is at 325 St. Clair Street. Greenhouse Ministries needs volunteers, and they have a volunteer orientation every Thursday morning at 10. That's at Greenhouse Ministries, 307 South Academy Street. Don't forget the free computer classes from the Rutherford County Library System. They're offering them over at the Tech Center, the one on Minerva Drive. One of the free classes is at 3:30 Monday afternoon, and the other is at 2:30 on Tuesdays. For more information, contact the Rutherford County Library System. And WGNS is happy to list your Good Neighbor events. Get them to us at least 2 weeks before they occur.
Rutherford weather.
We'll see sunny skies here this afternoon with a high in the mid-60s. Tonight, partly cloudy, a low near 38. By Wednesday, sunshine high 69. I'm meteorologist Jennifer Wojcicki on News Radio WGNS. Currently, it's 43.
Broadcasting from the Middle Tennessee Electric Studios, MTE Sharing Change has now donated more than $11 million to local nonprofits assisting worthy causes in our community. MTE, serving to make life better since 1936.
This is the Roundtable from News Radio WGNS on FM 101.9 and AM 1450 Murfreesboro, FM 100.5 Smyrna. Listen and watch at wgnsradio.com.
And welcome back to the second segment of Tuesday Mornings with Rick and Wayne. And it's certainly our pleasure and honor to have Dr. Mark Gullion, Director of Special Population and Federal Programs for Rutherford County Schools. And, of course, a long-time Smyrna boy, Smyrna High School graduate. And, of course, the first part of your education, you went someplace else, but you corrected it by coming back and getting a couple of degrees from Middle Tennessee. So you are true blue now.
That's right. That's right.
But we're glad to have you this morning. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Yeah.
We maybe talk a little bit about how those funds are spent, or what do we do for those Title I students?
So we can kind of talk in terms of, I mentioned adding 3 schools for the 25-26 school year. So Rocky Fork Middle, Rock Springs Middle, and Smyrna High School. So we're actually planning meetings this week. And it's kind of hard to believe, but the previous school year and the numbers and the data that you have from the previous school year actually generate the funds for the following year. So currently, I mentioned that those 3 schools have now kind of hit that threshold where they're above 70% free and reduced lunch for their school. And so what we'll hold this week at each of those 3 buildings is a community meeting. And the first decision that has to be made is, do you want to be targeted assisted as a school, or do you want to be school-wide? Meaning, when you receive that allocation as a school, how do you want to utilize those funds? And currently, the 12 schools that we currently serve are all school-wide, meaning that you can use those funds for any student, any family, any educator in that building. So I always advise that, when you have those 2, but you have to have that meeting with the community and with the faculty and staff to make that determination first. And then you'll notice if you live in that community that you will receive invitations here in the next few weeks, the middle part of March, for a spring planning meeting. So each year our schools are planning not only how to utilize those funds and how to best serve students for the following school year, but it also gives them an opportunity to highlight how they utilize that funds for the current school year that we're in. What did we use them for staffing? That's a big piece of what our schools use those for. So, how did we enhance, our students' learning with the staffing piece? What types of professional learning did we provide? What type of technology did we bring into the building because of this funding that we're receiving? So those are just a few areas, but those are kind of the big areas that they highlight during that spring planning meeting. And then we gather information from our parents, other stakeholders. We gather information from our faculty and staff and say, what are ways that we didn't use this funding this year that we would like to for next year? And so it is, and kind of going back to your question there, it is a per pupil allocation. So we look at how many students are eligible for free or reduced lunch in that building, and they get a per pupil allocation, very similar to the way the state and local funds are generated at the district level. It is a per pupil allocation that the school receives.
I would think that, especially with your free and reduced families, that maybe especially in elementary, primary, elementary, maybe even middle school, that their only opportunity to develop any kind of ability to work with a laptop or tablet is probably in our schools.
It is, and one thing I know our community has some concerns. Our parents have concerns with monitoring that screen time because that has become more of a culture type thing for young kids. And so that's definitely something that we are focused on in the buildings as well, is limiting that time, but making sure that's impactful and that it's geared towards the standards and objectives that we're trying to meet in our schools.
So is it a double whammy to have a child that is socially and economically deficient and also ESL combined?
It can be, yes, and we have students that fall into multiple subgroups. Like you're mentioning, you've got a student with disability that may be an English learner and also may be socially economic, have some deficiencies there. So a lot of times with those students, it's just providing them with experiences. A lot of times, especially in our elementary schools, and we currently serve 8 of our 14 schools next year will be elementary, it's providing them with those experiences that they may not have had an opportunity to have. I think about when I was a teacher and administrator at the school level, taking students on field trips, taking them to see a play, taking them to do things that they may not have had opportunities for. A lot of times in our schools, we're reading texts with students that, again, they may not have background knowledge on. So giving them those opportunities that they may not have had before.
With the state's push with bringing back a lot of the TCAT style HVAC and construction work and everything else, that's more for that middle and high school range. So how's that tie into, like, I know that we've got a STEM program like at Smyrna Elementary School for one. I know they built a thing out front and things like, how do they tie in those STEM programs to that lower educational thing for these Title I schools?
Yes, we're very fortunate, and kind of going off to that question, what I do to our schools is encourage them to think outside of the box, because what's important about these federal funds is, and you'll hear this terminology used a lot, SNS, or supplement, not supplant. So it's a situation where you can't use this funding to supplant what the district's already providing. But if you have a program like you mentioned, and next year we'll have 2 high schools that will serve, both Smyrna and Laverne, with that you can enhance those programs that already exist. And so I'm excited, as we're kind of in the infancy stage of serving some of our high schools with Title I, I'm excited to see some of the things that they're doing. To highlight what Laverne High School's done is a couple of things here recently. They've actually, in year 1 of being a Title I school, really focused on chronic absenteeism. And what that basically means is any child that has missed more than 10% of the school year. So most school years are 180 days. We're talking about students that have missed 18 days or more. And in year 1, several years ago, they had over 25%. So 1 out of every 4 kids were missing more than 18 days of the school year. They were able to use this funding to really put a focus on that and put a position, not focusing on those kids who are already chronically absent, but focusing more on those kids who are trending in that direction. And so they were able to decrease that into the single digits as far as percentages. So that's just kind of one example, but a way that they're really utilizing those funds to enhance something that's already happening. Another thing that we know are important to those families, especially for those families of juniors and seniors that are thinking about what is kind of the next chapter, a big thing is the FAFSA. For those students that are interested in, going to post-secondary. And so they were able to create or purchase some laptops, some iPads where families can go into the school, get assistance with filling out that paperwork for their child.
Part of the Rotary thing, we have Interact students that we partner with Laverne, Stewart's Creek, and Smyrna high schools. And just in the last few years, I've noticed the change of when we introduce those students, and they might get up and say their name and what year they in and what they where they want to go or achieve in the next level. And it was always that going to college, and they would name a school or something they were going to try to go to. And if you kind of follow up, a lot of times that wasn't happening. And I've noticed in the past year, there's several that are all talking TCAT and construction management and concrete management and everything else that these Interact kids that are getting at the high school level, they're getting a taste of that now. And I think it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's, I think we've shifted just within the last maybe 5 to 8 years of really saying every child's got to go to college. And that's just not the case. Because, you have some of those students who are, going through a 12-month or 18-month program, and they're coming out making really good money. And they're not necessarily taking out school loans and putting themselves behind in life as they're just getting started.
So many of our students, especially in our Title I, their guaranteed meals are at school. Their breakfast and their lunch are at schools. And, of course, like I said, Rick and I've had Ms. Johnson on several times, and we know that Smyrna Rotary and Second Harvest and some of our faith-based groups are sending backpack homes, over the weekends for children to make sure, students, to make sure they have something to eat.
Absolutely. And I know Dr. Sullivan in his career, and he worked in a lot of Title I schools himself, and Mr. Evans and those that, have to make those hard decisions on, when we have inclement weather days. But that's one of the things that I know our mind always go to, like you mentioned, for some of our students, that is their meals for the day.
Right.
And when you have back-to-back or 3 or 4 days that we're out of school because of inclement weather, those backpacks do come in handy. Ms. Johnson has done a tremendous job of establishing relationships all across Rutherford County and even outside of our county to get those opportunities for our students. Of course, we make it discreet, but kids know in our buildings that if they need food, they know who to contact, and hopefully are able to get that for them and their families.
Does our lunch program run a deficit every year? So like free and reduced lunch, or just some kids every day that don't have the money to be able to provide to have that meal? Does the federal funding kick in and make that a zero line, or we run a deficit every year with that?
So as far as the deficit is concerned, that typically generates from those students who are full pay, but they're charging lunches. And so, before when I was an administrator, you could set that as a threshold. A student couldn't get to a certain amount, a dollar amount as far as charges are concerned.
Right.
But that's no more. So really, if a family fills out the application and they meet those expectations for free and reduced, then that's subsidized. But if it's a student that's full pay and has those charges, it can create a deficit for the district. Fortunately, the last few years, our cafeteria funds have been able to make up that deficit. But it is something that the district has to take on.
Mm-hmm. Well, the problem with high schools, you have the ego,
absolutely.
A child, a student, certainly does not want to be identified in that aspect, and it breaks my heart for, even a freshman to a senior to go hungry.
Right.
When those opportunities are available.
Right. And like you said, sometimes it can be the embarrassment because as they're older, they don't want to stand out to their peers.
Well, they don't want to have that stigma, I
Sure.
guess.
Sure.
And I know you try to be as discreet as you can be, but still, it is what it is.
It is.
It's just, Rick and I hate the thought of a child being hungry.
Absolutely. And, a lot of times when we get caught up in the academics, sometimes we can forget about, a child that's hungry is not going to learn. Sure. And so, we've got to take care of those basic needs for our students as well.
With the change in the federal administration, and there's even talk of getting rid of the Department of Education swirling around. So are y'all just stuck in the rumor mill, or there been any letters come down and say, hey, this is what our future looks
any
like?
Heads up?
Yeah. I know we always like to know ahead of time where we're going to get hit at, but sometimes you just don't know.
It would be nice. No letters or memos that have sent yet. A lot of it's rumors. Did have an opportunity last week to sit in front of I think it's what's probably the most well-respected attorney group that's out of D.C. That works with federal funds, Brustein and Manasevit. And so we got to hear one of their lead attorneys. And she did talk about, obviously there's a lot of discussion about ED, or the Department of Education, from the U.S. Department side being dismantled, dissolved. But she said as far as federal funding is concerned, she felt like at this moment that would continue to flow through the states. So even though the department may dissolve, she felt pretty good about where we were with funding for right now.
Mm-hmm.
So with those federal dollars coming down for, autism has just been, has mushroomed.
Mm-hmm.
So with the federal dollars coming down, it comes through the state, and with the General Assembly going into this voucher thing, which my personal opinion is that it's not going to help our at-risk students, because they're not going to be able to go to a private school.
Right.
It's just not it's not feasible from where I sit. And is there some kind of protection for those dollars, that's coming down for the economically disadvantaged and those with as special education needs? Is there some hard, fast statute that protect those funds, that the state could not divert them someplace else?
That's a good question. The interesting piece, just hitting on one of the things you said there, is for the last several years, the state has almost had a voucher system, in essence, for students who have specific disabilities. And so it's been called an IEA, or Individual Education Account, where dollars have been given to specific disabilities of students for families who choose to have their child go to a private school or a homeschool situation. So that's been interesting. It's been few, especially in our school district, but that has been allowed over the last few years. Now my understanding with the vouchers is that this first year will be 20,000. 10,000 of them are supposed to be reserved for economically disadvantaged families. I kind of feel like I don't know that information is going to get to them, or are they going to be able to make up the difference between the money that's allotted to them and what this private school would cost, should they choose to attend that?
Well, if you recall that when the Tennessee lottery came out, all of the post-secondary schools' tuitions increased.
Right.
And of course the lottery money helped, but the tuitions at these private schools are going to increase as well because of that available money.
That's a good point. But, as far as your question with autism and students with disabilities that have specific disabilities, that would continue to come through that IDEA funding.
Okay.
And our economically disadvantaged would still continue to come through Title I.
Okay.
Wow. You're listening to Dr. Mark Goulian with Rutherford County Schools. He's the Director of Special Population and Federal Programs. I Googled it, man. I got it better for this one. But, we're going to take our second break. Be right back with you.
A
Attention! If you owe money to the IRS, this is an urgent message. The IRS is cracking down by sending out collection letters, garnishing paychecks, seizing bank accounts, and putting liens on homes and businesses. They call it enforced compliance, and you better watch out because penalties and interest on unpaid taxes compound daily, making it even harder to get out of debt. Don't let tax debt destroy your life. You need to call Optima Tax Relief, America's #1 tax resolution firm. They're experts in taxpayer assistance programs that can save you thousands if you qualify. A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau, Optima's resolved over $1 billion of tax debt for their clients. Let them fight on your behalf, helping to put your tax problems to rest. Call the tax professionals at Optima now for a free consultation.
Call 800-367-6289. 800-367-6289. 800-367-6289.
Optima Tax Relief.
Some restrictions apply. For complete details, please visit OptimaTaxRelief.com.
Mike Klassen with Middle Point Landfill.
The cost if Middle Point doesn't exist to you as a taxpayer is going to be significant.
Trash, let's be careful where we throw it away.
The next closest landfill for Middle Point right now is down in Lewisburg.
Garbage that we generate will have to be taken upstream.
That's about $90 per ton of waste to get it there.
Cost to take out the trash will trickle down to local residents and businesses. The answer's here, Middle Point Landfill. We don't need to take our garbage up the creek without a paddle.
This is Kim Dunaway from Sunshine Nutrition Center. You hear me on Monday mornings at 7:20 talking about how to lead a healthier lifestyle. We carry supplements, personal care, and grocery items at both our Murfreesboro and Smyrna locations, family owned and operated since 1989.
One of the most popular Bell Jewelers gifts for Mother's Day is birthstone jewelry to represent the kids, the spouse, the whole family for that matter. We have stackable rings in all different birthstone colors. We've done family jewelry, whether it's necklace or a family tree. But make sure to come in time because every kid has a different birthstone usually. So come to Bell Jewelers, 821 Northwest Broad Street, across from Toots.
If you're not waking up to the Wake Up Crew, here's what you've been missing.
Disgruntled Workers Day. At this moment, I am a disgruntled worker.
Don't miss the Wake Up Crew with John, Brian, and Dalton. Weekday mornings from 6 until Swap and Shop.
First Shot, growing in Christ with life and athletic skills.
So we teach God's Word at everything we do to implant it in them so that they understand that the only way to get through the world is with God on their side.
First Shot founder and executive director Andy Herzer.
Our focus is on our inner city here at Patterson Park.
From academics to athletics, First Shot's focus is toward building a stronger, more courageous spirit to face opportunities and obstacles that our youth confront every day. To find out more about First Shot, go to firstshottn.org.
This is the Roundtable from News Radio WGNS on FM 101.9 and AM 1450 Murfreesboro, FM 100.5 Smyrna. Listen and watch at wgnsradio.com.
And welcome back to the third and final segment of Tuesday Mornings with Rick and Wayne. And it's certainly been our pleasure and honor this morning to have Dr. Mark Gullion, Director of Special Population and Federal Programs for Rutherford County Schools. And, of course, I've always referred to it as Title I.
Yes, sir.
But I am an oldie. Hopefully I'm a still goodie, but we're pleased to have you this morning, Mark.
Yes, sir. Well, one of the things that we didn't talk about, but kind of the reason that it's kind of spawned into federal programs, we mentioned several of those federal grants, but post-COVID, or really I guess during COVID, ESSER funding was huge for our school district. And so we were able to use that, additional pot of money over the last several years to really do some great things in our school district, as far as we talked about laptops earlier, but being able to provide new laptops. Typically, shelf life is about 3 years with the laptops, and so being able to do things like that for our students has been tremendous and been a blessing for our school district over the last several years.
Wow. Talk about back on the ESL programs, because like you said, it's kind of exploded in the last few years, and we've had Smyrna High School Dr. Sutherland on a couple of times, and there's about 39 different languages spoke at Smyrna High School alone. So how many ESL teachers do we got? How do you run that program? Because you can't go out and recruit 39 different languages of people to be able to teach, right?
Right. And that's such a good question. So currently the state mandate is for every 35 students that are English learners, you have to have a teacher. So it's been almost astounding to see the growth that we've had in that area, which makes our schools much more diverse. And again, to me, makes it much more rewarding for those students that we're serving. But we looked at some numbers. Miss Megan Turnbow is our ESL coordinator, and she's been in that role for about 18 months now. But she's did a tremendous job under a situation where, you know, every day we're adding students that are English learners. But when I started in the school district, I mentioned this is my 23rd year in Rutherford County schools. But I think when I started in the district, we were probably, 25,000 students. And now we are over 51,000.
Yeah.
So we've basically doubled. But then I looked at the numbers back in the fall for the last 10 years for, 2014-15 school year to this school year, we've gained about 11,000 students just in the last 10 years.
This is probably going to be the most controversial question that I ask, but with the new administration and their emphasis on closing the border,
sure,
where are all these children coming from?
It's interesting, and our district definitely tracks that.
Okay.
And definitely even tracks, from the countries that they are coming from. Obviously, just like cities or county school districts, that can vary. Obviously, from countries, it can vary too. You have some very established countries that have, public education as a possibility for children. And you have some countries where when they come to us, it may be their first experience in a public school.
Sure.
So to answer your question, it's a lot. It's a lot of different countries that our students are coming from. It's not just one area. We now have over 100 languages that are spoken in the district. Now,
Wow.
some of those, maybe one family, but we have a lot of languages that are there. But of those 11,000 students that we have gained as new students to Rutherford County schools in the last 10 years, 5,500 of them are English learners. So what that
Wow.
tells me is over the last 10 years, 1 out of every 2 students coming to us.
Makes me wonder if sometimes they're not fleeing the larger city and taking advantage of a system like Rutherford County that does very well and offers so many services.
Could be. It's I think a lot of different reasons. The other challenge that our schools are having, especially on our northern end, we have schools that, over 50% of their families are speaking another language at home. So being able to communicate obviously is vital for us in the building, between home and school and home. So not only providing ESL teachers, but also providing educational assistants and translators that can help us with that communication. Obviously, there's a lot of AI out there right now. There's a lot of apps that are available that give us or afford us that ability to communicate, but that continues to be a challenge for us.
These kids are bright, and
Mm-hmm.
I learned it my last few years of being in police work is when I would have to interview parents about something that did not speak English.
Sure.
A lot of times I used the kids as my translator.
Yes.
And, it's not only Spanish, but it was Arabic and several other languages that we got an influx in around the Smyrna area, especially after Katrina. If y'all think back how far long ago that was, we got a big influx from New Orleans area that were brought here and then they never left. Well,
Sure.
They already were English as a second language in that New Orleans area, and then they transplanted here, and it just that was our first influx that I saw on the north end of the county is when we got Katrina and we got all those people, which I was on the commission during then, and those planes were in the sky that they flew out of New Orleans, and they didn't know where they were going to take them. And then we got a phone call and said, 2 hours out, we've got planes landing at Smyrna, at Stewart, and you're going to have, 120 souls, and we had to find bedding and place to put them that quick. And like I said, we thought we would greet people coming off, and a lot of them didn't speak, unfortunately didn't speak English, and that was my first. And it's only gotten, like you said, in the last 10 years, it's only that's crazy. 1 out of every 2 now is English as a second language.
What you said too about these kids being bright, it's been interesting for me as I go back and I'm in schools quite a bit. Now I am seeing former students that I had as an administrator or even as a teacher, and they're working in our schools. Them being bilingual is definitely an advantage for us moving forward, again, so that we can communicate with those families, communicate with those students.
So you have a number of affluent population schools.
Sure.
And those parents are able to get back to the school through support programs like PTO. Then you have schools that are high poverty, if you want to use that term. I remember in my last years with the school board, there was a real initiative to try to get those students whose parents were economically disadvantaged to pull them into the school, and even though they may not be able to write a check, but to show support and for their children to see this is important.
Sure.
Mom and dad, or mom or dad's here.
Yep. And I don't think I said this earlier, but specific to Title I funding, when we give each school their allocation, so those 14 schools for next year, there's actually a line item that is specific to parent engagement, and that is a required set aside that school has to provide. But we talk with our schools so many times. It doesn't really have to do with socioeconomic status, but so many of our parents may have had a bad experience in school themselves. So any opportunity that we have where we can bring them in and really talk to them about what's different, because everybody's been to school, everybody had an experience, good or bad, right?
We found that, hadn't we, Rick?
So we want to, bring them into school to talk to them about what is your child doing during those 7 hours, and then how can you support, or how can we connect that with what you're doing at home. I think that's kind of a lost art as we move forward. There's not a lot of time set aside in the home where you're working on things at school. So anything that we can provide to enhance that is going to be important.
Great deal. What else we ain't covered? I'm trying to think. Title I I've kind of gone through, but we've hit a lot of the high points, and I made a lot of notes today. So
yes.
What do you forecast over the next year, being the director of what you're over, and this is a fast and fluid thing? What's your goals for the fall, let's say? Because I know your budgetary things with the county commission, y'all are turning those in now. And taking the highlighter and the red pen all over them. But what are you looking for?
As a district, and not necessarily speaking about federal funding, but, with us as a state moving to that TISA model for the past 2 years, that's definitely been a transition, but we continue to grow, even though maybe many of the school districts across Tennessee, and we kind of lose sight of this a lot of times, most of the school districts across Tennessee are less than 5,000 students. We continue to grow while most school districts across the state are shrinking. They're losing students. And so I think that's what makes us unique. Again, bringing in a lot more diversity. To me, again, a lot more rewarding, but makes us unique, and I think that's going to be important for our commission to understand, our funding body, that we continue to grow. If you couldn't tell, I'm a Rutherford County guy. It's important to me. A lot of people have put a lot into me. I could list names, go on and on and on, as far as teachers that I had, administrators that I had, mentors along the way that I've had. Rutherford County is a high-performing district. We continue to be year in and year out, but we know that money talks. And so being able to fund our school district at an appropriate way is going to be important moving forward.
Yeah.
Are you seeing ESL students, their pathway is more career and technical or the university, or is there any way to even keep up with that?
Yeah, it's, I think that piece is they're just like any student. They come with varied backgrounds. They come with varied abilities. I think our job is to really find out what their passion is, what looks like a good pathway for them, and especially as they move into the high school level, fostering them into the right direction. We never want to pigeonhole students, but we also want to be honest with them in our conversations and, try to get them started on that post-secondary career in the right way.
Just want to say thank you for being with us, and God bless you for your years and years of taking care of our students.
I appreciate it. Anytime we can publicize and talk about Rutherford County schools in a positive way, that's always a good day for us. So I appreciate it.
Amen.
Very much so. Everybody, hope you enjoyed our show today with Dr. Mark Goulian with Rutherford County Schools. But have a great day. Get out, get some vitamin D today. I think we might get close. Brian, you'll probably touch on that, but we might touch 70 today, maybe.
That would be
Then a couple of degrees
sweet.
of it.
Yes,
so
sir.
if you stay in the sun long enough, it'll feel 70. How's that? But have a great week, and we'll talk to you next week.